someone who follows our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, even our community posts on YouTube, we promised that we would be here live to discuss the season's first El Clasico between Real Madrid and Barcelona. And well, I guess you could say that in some ways we were treated to a pretty good game, but it was also a very one sided game, and that's something that was quite frankly reflected in the scoreline. So, the breaking news update for those of you who would, of course, be joining us is that Real Madrid have won the season's first El Clasico, and they did so with a relatively comfortable 3-0 margin. So it wasn't really the toughest of outings for them. I'm sure Real will have tougher outings through the season. This, however, wasn't one of them, and Barcelona, for all intents and purposes, were outplayed, outclassed, and of course outscored. Now, a quick summation on how it is that the match went. Obviously, this was a home match for Real Madrid, so they were, of course, always going to be starting favourites. But Barca put out a pretty decent lineup, Real's lineup as well, full of quality. Unfortunately, what happened there was that the one thing which Barca would have wanted to avoid is what happened, is that Real Madrid scored first, and of course it had to be that man Karim Benzema who was on the score sheet early on. So it was never really in doubt once he was in a position as good as he was, that he would miss out on the finish, and that's exactly what happened. What happened even more so, which actually killed off the game just in the first half, was when Fede Valverde, who's of course Real Madrid's ultimate utility man, he'll play in pretty much any position, he's just happy to be there at all times, and he's someone who'll do his best regardless of where it is he's played. He too ended up having a very good match, and remember, he was starting on the wings this time around. He got the second goal, and it came a little bit against the run of play because Barca had started kind of keeping the ball well enough by that point. But once that second goal was in, you knew it was going to be an uphill task for Barcelona to get back into the game. Indeed, that's exactly what happened in the second half, because again, despite the fact that Barcelona had a lot of possession, they didn't in fact have too much in terms of penetration. There wasn't much in the way of creation of chances, and in fact the only time they really looked like actually creating chances was once Xavi rung in the changes. So if you remember that he made more than a couple of substitutions, but the key ones of course were bringing on Ansu Fati and then bringing on Ferran Torres. And of course Fati, it was so good to actually watch Fati boss the game the way he did, at least for that brief moment. You watch him and it's easy to remember that he's still very young, and he's unfortunately lost out a lot of game time through injuries. Hopefully, he can have a nice long run in the first team now, because again, the kind of play he was putting on there was sublime, and the way he made Ferran Torres' goal, and that goal actually brought Barca back into the game. Unfortunately for them, ended up conceding a bit of a soft penalty, and yes, people will of course talk about the fact that it was a soft penalty, and to me too it looked like a soft penalty, but of course Eric Garcia did in fact get a foot in there, and VAR ruled that was enough for a foul, so the penalty was given. Rodrigo sealed the deal, sealed the 3 points with the third goal of the match. Now, obviously, as I said, it's a very clinical win for Real Madrid, and it ensures that Real Madrid now go 3 points clear on the top of the table. Remember, before this match, Barca were in fact ahead, but they were ahead only on goal difference. However, now it is Real who are ahead, but they're ahead by 3 points. So the bad news continues for Barcelona, because you remember that Barcelona, and I'd done a video on it as well, they're in dire straits when it comes to their Champions League campaign. They need some results to go their way if they are to make it into the next round. Whereas for Real Madrid, they really picked up where they left off from last season. Remember, defending league champions, defending Champions League champions, and they're just playing the exact same way. They haven't really missed a beat, and even today it looked like Barca were the second best team, except that very brief spell when they in fact got that goal. Beyond that, of course, Barca just looked like the second best team all night. Let me just take a couple of your comments, because I'm seeing a few coming in. Abhinav Iyer has a couple of comments which I think are worth taking. He says that one, Madrid outclassed Barca. Totally agree. And the second is that Xavi will be sacked if Barca loses against Bayern. And you know what? I think you're right. If he loses that match, I think there's already plenty of pressure on Xavi, because again, the board have done a lot to actually support him in the transfer market. You remember they activated all those quote-unquote economic levers, and they've brought in money, they've brought in players, they've gotten rid of a few players that Xavi didn't really see in his plans. But the standard in Barcelona is always going to be ridiculously high. You can't be losing a Clasico. You can't possibly, and that too in such meek fashion. So one thing if it were a hard-fought encounter, but this was a very meek match. It was a very meek surrender from Barca. They had a lot of possession, but they didn't really do much with it. And of course, then due to that, Real on the other hand didn't really need much of the possession, but the chances that they got for the most part they took. And that, in the end of the day, is what wins you a football match. Another comment which I'll take is that La Liga says that in La Liga, I think in Love Rami says that in La Liga, I think a 77% win for Real Madrid if we talk about head-to-head, and overall 101 win according to the stats. Yeah, Real in recent times have of course been the more dominant team in this particular rivalry, and we know for a fact that there's not really much to compare. But yeah, the stats don't lie in that regard. Real Madrid fans are going to be very happy with this particular win. Siddhartha Das says that El Clasico is not the same now, and he's saying that I only believe Messi versus Ronaldo was the best El Clasico ever. You know what? You're entitled to an opinion, and that's fair enough, but I think you're going to find a lot of people who agree with you in that regard. El Clasicos don't quite have the same oomph now that they did when you had Messi and Ronaldo going up against one another. In fact, I remember one season when the Clasico ended 2-2, and it was Messi who scored 2 goals for Barca, and it was Ronaldo who scored 2 goals for Real. So I think that was peak time. But of course, El Clasico is a rivalry that runs deeper than just 2 players. It's a rivalry that has gone on for decades, centuries. It's not just a footballing thing. It's also very political in nature. So in that regard, I don't agree with the fact that it's lost its edge. It definitely has an edge, but it definitely does feel like I think Barca need to improve a lot to get to Real's level at this point for it to become a competitive match again. Love Ravi said that it was a one-sided affair that El Clasico was saying, but Real have had the edge every time they face each other. And by the way, your fave team Chelsea won. Mason Mount again, the young hero. Kudos, Shane. Yes, indeed. I was actually also following that match on the side. Very, very happy to see Mason Mount get back in among the goals. I know he copped some stick from some fans, but I think he's a quality player, and thankfully he's going out there and proving his class. So in that regard, I'll take your leave for now. Thank you guys all so much for joining us. There is another big match going on between Liverpool and Manchester City, and that's on my TV screen right now. That's why I turned my head. Still 0-0, but the first half is about to get over. I'm not expecting this match to end 0-0. I'll be very shocked if it does. But whatever the score, don't forget to join us live on Sports Today, because I'll be bringing you some nice, post-match analysis, and of course we can have a chat. So don't forget to join us for that. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tap the bell icon, leave us a comment, and of course follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Last but not least, don't forget to download the Sports Spec app for all the breaking news updates from around the world. Thank you all once again for joining us. I hope to see you all again later tonight, and for now, goodbye.